As soon as I entered the house, I screamed desperately, "Maria, where are you?" The sound of a faint cry echoed through the house, but I couldn't find her. Something was deeply wrong. When I finally found her in the bedroom, I was frozen. My daughter, who had always loved her beautiful, long curls, now had her head completely shaved. "Sweetheart, what happened? Who did this to you?" My voice trembled, and a wave of indignation began to rise within me. Through sobs, she replied, "It was Grandma, Mom. She said I looked like a troublemaker with my hair and shaved it all off forcefully." In that moment, a mix of shock, pain, and anger overwhelmed me, and right then, I promised I wouldn't let this go. I am Julia, 38 years old, single, and a full-time mother. My life revolves around my 15-year-old daughter, Maria. We live in a simple house in the suburbs. It's not luxurious, but it's our home, our safe haven. I work hard as a nurse, and despite the exhausting routine, I do everything I can to make sure we lack nothing. Maria is amazing, intelligent, creative, and full of personality. Her curls are so beautiful that even Rapunzel would be envious. She loves expressing who she is through her hair, and that has always been something special for us. If it were just the two of us, life would be perfect. But there is a constant presence that disturbs our peace: Laura, my ex-mother-in-law. Laura, 72 years old, a widow with a sharp tongue, lives too close for my liking. She helps take care of Maria after school, and I should be grateful for that, but the price I pay is constant criticism. "Julia, dear," she begins in that tone that drives me crazy, "don't you think Maria's hair is a bit messy?" I take a deep breath, trying to stay calm, and reply, "She likes it that way, Laura." Inside, I want to scream. Laura has always been strict, especially with her son, Carlos, Maria's father. She raised him under severe rules and total control, believing it would shape his character. However, this same control pushed him away, leading him to make decisions that landed him behind bars. Today, Maria doesn't have an active father in her life, and Laura blames me for it, as if I am responsible for Carlos's fate. Now, Laura seems to want to mold Maria the same way she tried to mold Carlos. She sees in her granddaughter a second chance to impose her rules and beliefs. At first, Laura begged to be present in Maria's life, saying she wanted to make up for lost time. "Julia, I'm getting old, but I want to be part of my granddaughter's life," she would say, almost pleadingly. Little did I know that this living arrangement would bring so much conflict and pain. I admit that, in a moment of need, I believed in Laura. As a single mother, facing exhausting shifts at the hospital, having someone to help seemed like a huge relief, even if that help came from her. I wanted to believe that her intentions were genuine, that maybe she could be a positive influence on Maria. I thought her criticisms were just part of her difficult personality. After all, help is help, right? But over time, I realized how wrong I was. Little by little, Laura began to take control. Her rules, expectations, and judgments invaded our lives, turning her presence into a burden. Instead of helping, she seemed to want to dictate how everything should be, just like she did with Carlos. And we all know how that ended. Thankfully, I have Isabel, my best friend and coworker, who always supports me. "How do you put up with that old cranky woman?" she asked the other day while we were having coffee, pouring sugar into her cup as if she were sweetening the bitter conversation. "You're a saint, Julia," she added, with a serious look. I laughed, but it was a tired laugh. My patience is at its limit, and Isabel knows that. Besides her, there's Paolo, my neighbor, who's always willing to help. He's a real gentleman, and, well, a handsome man. The way he smiles and the way his eyes meet mine could be dangerous if I hadn't learned my lesson with Maria's father. My rule now is clear: keep my distance. "Hey, Julia, need some help?" he asked, showing up in that tight shirt and easy smile. There he was, lifting boxes from the garage as if it were the simplest thing in the world. "Thank you, Paolo, you're an angel," I replied. But internally, I thought, a temptation I definitely don't need right now. My real battle, however, isn't with attractive neighbors, but with Laura. Every dinner feels like a silent battlefield. Maria, sit up straight, a young lady doesn't slouch, Laura ordered in the middle of the meal, with a tone that sounded like a sergeant training recruits. I saw Maria's shoulders slump, and my heart ached. Mom, do I really have to hear this? Maria whispered, exhausted. I looked at Laura, trying to show that this discussion was far from over. Just do your best, sweetheart, I said to my daughter, trying to comfort her. But my voice became firmer as I addressed Laura. We all have different ideas of what's important. Laura, unshaken, retorted, if you listen to me, Julia, this girl wouldn't be out of control. I clenched my fists under the table, struggling to keep calm. She's not out of control, Laura. She's expressing herself, and I won't stop her from doing that. My tone was harsher than I wanted, but I couldn't take it anymore. Laura gave me a cold look. Mark my words, Julia. Without discipline, this girl will end up in trouble. I watched Maria retreat to her room, her curls swaying as she walked. Little did I know it would be one of the last times I'd see them that way. A chill ran down my spine. Everything seemed on the verge of collapsing. After a long shift at the hospital, all I wanted was to get home, hug Maria, and forget about Laura, at least for a few hours. But as soon as I walked in, I sensed something was wrong. A heavy silence had taken over the house, bringing with it a terrible foreboding. Maria, my love, I'm home. I called, but there was no response. The silence seemed to saturate the air, full of tension. I hurried up the stairs to her room, and as soon as I opened the door, my heart stopped. Maria was curled up on the bed, her whole body shaking from crying. When she finally looked at me, I felt like my heart would shatter. Her curls were gone, not a single strand of hair was left on her head, it was completely shaved. Mom, Maria sobbed, running into my arms. Grandma did this while I was sleeping. I hugged her tightly, trying not to lose my composure. It's going to be okay, my love. We'll fix this, I whispered. But inside, my heart was burning with outrage. My mind screamed, how dare that woman do this to my daughter? Furious, I stormed into the living room like a whirlwind. Laura was sitting there, as calm as always, pretending nothing had happened. Laura! I shouted, my voice echoing through the house. What did you do to Maria? She looked at me, unmoved. I did what was necessary, she said calmly, as if what she had just done was perfectly acceptable. Necessary? You shaved her head against her will. Why? She was becoming vain and disobedient, Laura responded, without an ounce of remorse. I was shocked by the coldness in her words. Vain? Disobedient? Laura, she's 15. Have you lost your mind? It's time to learn discipline, she replied, as if dictating a law. In my day, girls who spent too much time getting ready lost their way. Today it's the curls, tomorrow, makeup and trendy clothes. And before you know it, they'll be pregnant and aimless. My hands trembled with anger. Are you crazy? Pregnant? Lost? Maria is just a teenager. Laura continued, unfazed. If you keep being so permissive, she'll end up like her father, directionless and without morals. That was the last straw. Shut up. I screamed. You've crossed every line. You shaved her head without permission. This isn't discipline, it's cruelty. Laura just laughed, a cold, cutting sound. You've always been weak, Julia. I did what you didn't have the courage to do. Before it was too late. Get out of my house. I shouted, tears streaming down my face. Never come near my daughter again. Without showing any remorse, Laura gathered her things. You'll regret this, Julia, she said with disdain, before leaving and slamming the door. When I was alone, I broke down. I felt like I had failed to protect Maria. But in that moment, I promised myself that Laura would never have the power to hurt us again. A sound at the door interrupted my thoughts. It was Paolo, our neighbor, with a concerned look on his face. Julia, I heard shouting. Is everything okay? I couldn't speak. I just pointed toward Maria's room. When he entered and saw my daughter, his face went from concern to disbelief. Who did this? He asked, his voice low with shock. Laura, I murmured, my voice full of anger. Paolo's expression changed. He was no longer just a helpful neighbor, he was ready to fight alongside us. This is unacceptable. I'm calling the police right now, he declared, his voice filled with indignation. Before he could grab the phone, Maria screamed, her voice choked with fear. No, please, she begged, her eyes brimming with tears as she curled into my arms. I don't want anyone to see me like this. I hugged my daughter tightly, trying to protect her from the pain that seemed to crush her. It's okay, my love, I whispered, trying to calm her. We won't do anything you don't want. Paolo, kneeling beside us, seemed torn between concern and anger. Is there anything I can do? He asked, his voice steady but full of kindness. Before I could answer, my phone vibrated. It was Isabel, my best friend. Her voice on the other end of the line was full of concern. Julia, what happened? I got your message, and it sounded like you were on the brink of collapse. With difficulty, through sobs, I told her everything that had happened. Isabel was silent for a moment before exploding. That woman is crazy. I'm coming over right now. A few minutes later, she arrived, arms full of bags, looking like a heroine ready to save the day. Okay, here's the plan, she said, as she dumped tissues, hats, and fashion magazines onto the table. I brought ideas for haircuts and some color inspirations. We're going to turn this around. Despite everything, a small smile appeared on Maria's face. Isabel always knew how to lighten the mood. Relax, darling. Isabel is here to save the day. And if that witch dares come back, we can handle it with a haircut, or an axe, she joked, making Maria weakly laugh. While Isabel worked on Maria's hair, doing the best she could with what was left, Paolo came closer, and I began to vent. I told him everything Laura had done, the wounds she had left, not just on Maria, but also on me. I can't believe I let this woman get so close to my daughter, I murmured, guilt weighing on every word. The following days were a mix of tears, anger, and sleepless nights. Maria refused to leave her room, let alone return to school. I called work, making up an excuse, because I knew my daughter needed me more than ever. I decided to take action. Our first stop was the police station, but frustration came quickly. The officer, seeming uninterested, said, I'm sorry, ma'am, but without physical evidence, this is a civil matter. Physical evidence? I exploded, unable to contain my indignation. Look at my daughter. How can you say there was no harm? The sense of injustice was overwhelming. Our next stop was a lawyer's office. He listened to our story attentively and said, we can file for emotional damages. It was a small glimmer of hope, but I knew no legal action could truly erase the trauma Maria had endured. In the meantime, Paolo was also acting on his own. I have a friend specialized in family law, he said, with determined eyes. He's willing to take the case without charging any fees. At that moment, I felt we were not alone. With Isabel by my side and Paolo ready to help, I realized we had a small army to face Laura. First, the looks and whispers began at the supermarket. The neighbors looked at us sideways, curious and judgmental. Then, came the calls from distant relatives, all full of questions and opinions I hadn't asked for. But none of that mattered. I knew I had a bigger battle ahead, and I was determined to win it. Julia, is it true that you've been neglecting Maria? My cousin's question came loaded with judgment, each word cutting. It was then that I realized the true extent of Laura's actions. She wasn't just trying to hurt me, she was trying to destroy my reputation. She spread rumors, painting me as a negligent and incompetent mother. Feeling the weight of it all, I collapsed on the sofa next to Isabel and Paolo. This woman is trying to turn everyone against me, I vented, my voice thick with anger and frustration. Laura, however, had underestimated my determination. If she wanted a battle, she was about to get one. I decided to act and began investigating her past, talking to old acquaintances and relatives. What I discovered was terrifying. One night, while I was with Maria, she finally opened up, revealing secrets she had kept for a long time. If I misbehaved, Grandma would say she was sending me to a boarding school, she confessed, hesitantly. Tears filled her eyes as she continued, she used to lock me in the closet when I did something wrong. My heart broke. How had I not realized it before? I hugged my daughter tightly, promising that none of this would ever happen again. It's not your fault, dear, I reassured her. Your grandmother will never have the chance to hurt you again. With the help of Isabel and Paolo, we began to prepare to face Laura. We installed cameras around the house and trained Maria to handle difficult situations, including how to use a voice recorder on her phone. If she shows up or calls, record everything. Every word is important, Paolo explained patiently, as Maria absorbed each instruction. Despite everything, I saw a strength in her determination that filled me with pride. We're in this together, Mom, she said, with a look that mixed courage and vulnerability. Finally, the day of the trial arrived. As we entered the courtroom, Maria squeezed my hand, and I felt her strength. You can do it, Mom, she whispered, filling me with a courage I didn't even know I had. Our lawyer began presenting the case, and the evidence was devastating. The footage from the cameras showed Laura's abusive behavior, her hateful words echoing in the courtroom. Each witness, from old family friends to a former piano teacher, shared stories that confirmed the pattern of abuse and manipulation. In the most difficult moment, Maria took the stand to give her testimony. Despite her trembling voice, she remained strong. She said that if I told my mom, she would make me disappear, she confessed, tears streaming down her face. When the judge announced the decision, I felt an indescribable relief. This court grants a permanent restraining order against the defendant and orders compensation for emotional damages and therapy costs, the judge declared firmly. Laura was officially out of our lives. As we left the courtroom, I felt as though an enormous weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I looked at Maria, who gave me a small smile. We knew that, despite everything, the worst was behind us. We were ready to start over. Laura made one last desperate plea. She approached us, tears running down her face, seeking some kind of forgiveness. Julia, Maria, I'm sorry, she began, her voice trembling. Before she could say more, I interrupted her firmly, without hesitation. Save your apologies, Laura. You no longer exist to us. I turned away, ignoring her pleas, and we moved forward. In that moment, I felt as if a huge burden had been lifted from my shoulders. We were finally free. The months that followed weren't easy, but we faced everything together. Maria started therapy, and little by little, I saw my daughter bloom again. The sparkle in her eyes returned, and so did her strength. She began to come out of her shell, and one evening, during a dinner with Isabel, Paolo, and me, she made an unexpected announcement. I want to donate the settlement money, Maria said with conviction. I want to help other children who went through what I went through. I smiled, proud of her strength and kindness. Her words echoed in my mind, and a new plan began to form. Maria was healing, but I still carried the anger from what Laura had put us through. She had tried to destroy my daughter and ruin my life. I couldn't just let all of that go. Laura, probably, thought the restraining order and the distance between us marked the end of the conflict. Little did she know, the real battle was only just beginning. I started by creating a false sense of calm. No contact, no confrontations. I let Laura believe she had won, that we were out of her life. But behind the scenes, I worked to reveal the secrets she had been hiding, exploring every detail of her past. Unpaid debts, old disputes, and even a financial scandal involving her late husband's money. With the help of Isabel and Paolo, we began to take action. It all started with anonymous letters sent to Laura's neighbors and the condominium where she lived. Innuendos about the scandal were enough to spark suspicion. Next, I reconnected with an old friend of Laura's, someone she had betrayed in the past. I arranged a casual reunion and encouraged the friend to expose stories that Laura would rather keep buried. Her image started to crumble. Laura thrived on the admiration she forced others to feel for her, but with her reputation destroyed, her facade collapsed. Isolated and despised, she made one last appeal, saying she was in financial difficulties and blaming her late husband for her situation. But the scandal became a joke among those who once respected her. Eventually, Laura was completely alone. No friends, no reputation, and no control, which she valued so much. She became irrelevant, something that hurt her more deeply than anything else. When I heard that she tried to contact me again, perhaps to ask for help, I realized that the compassionate version of me no longer existed. There was no longer a vulnerable Maria to protect, just me, watching from afar. Laura had tried to destroy my life, but in the end, she destroyed her own. Thank you for following this story. I would love to know what you think, so leave your comment and share your opinion. And of course, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next stories.